discussion today. So again, I'm Eric Terrell. I'm responsible for our generative AI COE, as well as all our technology and solutions for our AWS practice within Atos. We're a global IT services provider. We operate private and public cloud, and what we want to do is share with you a little bit today about Bedrock, one of the newer AWS AI services, give you an example of our internal use case, and share some lessons learned, because there's a lot going on in this space. So I promise this won't all be me reading off a screen and text, but the next two slides will be a little bit of that. So how do we define generative AI? Well, according to AWS, generative AI can create new content and ideas by attempting to mimic human intelligence in non-traditional computing. You can train generative AI to learn human language. You can also train it to learn programming languages or any complex subject matter powered by large language models. Doing this to solve sophisticated problems. For example, it can learn the English vocabulary and create a poem in context from the words it processes. So guess what's next? We've got a little poem here, and I'm not a poet, and I'm not good at this, but we'll give it a try. So generative AI. At AWS reInvent, and the cloud will be lost in a sea of tech jargon at quite a high cost. But don't fret or frown, for it's all in good fun in this conference where servers outshine the sun. With keynotes and sessions, we'll learn and we'll gawk at the latest tech trends while we sip on our mock. In a whirlwind of data, we'll all play our part at AWS reInvent, where cloud rules the chart. So grab your umbrella, because it might just rain code, and come join the fun where servers erode. In this digital circus, we'll laugh and we'll vent at AWS reInvent, where the clouds are intent. So had a little fun. Thank you. Let's jump into the AWS generative AI portfolio. Now, it's been a couple weeks and months since we first, had the idea of this discussion, and as I mentioned, this is a dynamic environment, so a lot's changing. So this slide will have changed considerably this week, but we're going to talk about a few of the core generative AI services that AWS provides. So we have Amazon Bedrock, which is your trusted AI capability to run generative AI on your data in a secure environment. So we've seen articles in the media about how customers have possibly put corporate data or IP out into the public domain. With Bedrock, we solve for that, right? So it's your environment in the cloud, you're using Bedrock on your data, and we're able to implement foundational models and large language models, both from Amazon, like their Titan and Titan embeddings, as well as third-party frameworks like Claude, Cohere, Stable Diffusion, and then pair that with Amazon's Code Whisperer tool, which is the coding companion, so being able to generate software through Amazon's platform. In addition to that, there are many machine learning services. Some of these predate Bedrock and generative AI, but we use Amazon SageMaker Jumpstart to be able to create production models leveraging publicly available capability from Stability, Meta, and Hugging Face, as well as using proprietary models from Cohere, Lyra, and AI21. And then combining that with a machine learning framework and infrastructure to be self-managed. So the idea around Bedrock is it is a managed service and brings that capability and a framework together. This self-managed machine learning allows for customers to use PyTorch and the community within Hugging Face. I'll try to get out of the way here. And this is just a piece of it. So this has been augmented this week. There are new features, new capabilities. We'll be happy to discuss more of that with you after this. So for Amazon Bedrock, how does it work? Well, it's the easiest way to build and scale generative AI applications using foundational models. So we choose from these leading models, and we can access a range of these foundational models through an API-based interface. And then this is customized with your data in a secure environment. So this is where things like the RAG framework come in to fine-tune the models, because these tend to be large NLP or natural language processing models. They're great with text and code, but they do need to be fine-tuned for your use case. So connecting your data sources to enable that is critical. And then Bedrock enables task execution to be able to configure agents and dynamically invoke APIs. So what does this mean, and what is this in the real world? So I've often said with customers and peers, I've been in this ecosystem since about 2009 when AWS was S3, EC2, and CloudFront. Work on something real. It's great to work on feasibility, it's great to tinker. Party Rock on AWS is a great tool, but the real learning comes in when you have to solve the problems around your application or your business. And so that's exactly what we did. We looked at what we call AI contract insights for our legal team. And their problem was that they're manually going through contracts as part of an analysis on a corporate organization. And this takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. You're combing through documents. So they wanted an AI-augmented automation framework to help them compress timelines, reduce manual efforts, and be able to get value more quickly. Our objective, demonstrate the feasibility of using Gen AI to extract key contract information for contract managers. We had some requirements. So we're ingesting Word and PDF documents. We're employing OCR for image text. And we have to understand the text meaning for accurate extraction. So this means we're searching for specific contract language and information. We're extracting named entities, answering questions naturally in conversational format, and supporting multiple languages for our business. Initially, this was thought to be something that would have to be put into a private cloud due to security concerns. So with Bedrock coming out, this gave us the opportunity to launch this within Bedrock. And so as we've integrated that with our overall data platforms, we've created an internal document repository in Amazon S3. I'll go a little bit more into the technical architecture. We created a retrieval augmentation generation model that's really the fine-tuning of those LLMs for our specific use cases. We've added prompt selection and context and simplified that with a web interface and UX. The bigger picture here is that we've standardized this across our solution framework and our deployments, and that's something I'll talk about a little bit more. So the use cases for this, we're locating specific clauses in contracts, we're identifying potential risks to our business, we're assisting in contract negotiations, and we're facilitating contract management. So this is a screenshot of our front end here. So as you can see here, this is pretty simplified. We've chosen the model Claude 2 from Anthropic. We've registered kind of the initial contract for context, and we've asked this question: does the customer have the obligation to provide facilities to the provider? I think you can see there's multiple use cases based on your document set, your subject matter, where this can be implemented on a variety of topics, not just legal AI and contracts. So we get our answer through that process. Based on the provided context, it seems the agency does have some obligation to inform this contractor, but specifically the contract mentions that the contractor has received all information requested from the agency. It gives reference to the page in the document that it finds, and then it goes into a little bit more detail about that context, citing the various chunks, et cetera, the score of those in terms of the ranking system we have, as well as the document it's retrieved from. So the results of this with our legal team and our contracts group, the generative AI legal solution is a game changer for our contract management. It automates the retrieval of contractual information across our portfolio. signed contracts, saving us time and money. We no longer need a central contract team to manually search and inventory hundreds of thousands of contracts. Instead, we can now focus this team on more strategic and value-added tasks. And that's aligned with all of kind of the cloud methodology and alignment, right? We're reducing the need to manually do things that don't differentiate our business, referred to as undifferentiated heavy lifting, and we focus on higher value to our business, whether that's better operational value or revenue generating items. So, let's get into a little bit of what's behind the scenes here in this retrieval augmented generation framework. So starting with our question, we have our query engine. And this query engine is a combination of entire documents as well as a hybrid search capability that has a keyword retriever and an embedding retriever. That's the numerical representation of some of this text. And that gets processed within a vector store where we're basically ranking the output for this. So this is how the AI framework understands, which answers are going to be better for this question. And then the output of that is those related information chunks that we have there. So we've got the instruction, the context, the question, and the prompt, and that spits out, in this example, a reference to the legal piece of information here from Bedrock. So we've provided this context below. As you saw in the prior screenshot, you have that. So that's really helpful in terms of, not just giving the answer, but also providing context so that can be verified, et cetera. Again, this is still early days in some of these frameworks, and you have to keep in mind that as you're working through these, you do need to validate results. If you've used any of the kind of open AI frameworks, you'll know that there are some delusional responses that come out of that. So trust but verify to a certain extent. So, you saw the architecture. How did this really come together? Well, we're focused on AI. So for us to focus on core infrastructure and things like that are really not focused on what we're trying to get at. And that's really good because we've developed, in conjunction with AWS, what we call our landing zone accelerator. And that's really the foundation of everything we do with our customers to make sure that they have an enterprise-grade, production-ready, software-defined data center in AWS that has capability to have an automated deployment. So again, in a real-world scenario, if we had no presence in AWS, our corporate IT or security or someone might say, well, we're not going to let you use this, or we need to make sure that we've got governance and security and controls in place. Well, that's what our landing zone provides. So this gives you the security, the controls, the governance, the capability to create accounts and manage the environments. And so within our innovation engine and our generative AI COE, we didn't have to focus work on this. So this was an accelerator for us. We were able to get right into it. But there is some preparation work to be done. So again, this is your data. So that data needs to be ingested, processed, made available. So we leveraged standardized architecture, Amazon S3, Postgres, and OpenSearch to build that data landscape and environment, connect that to Bedrock, and then we built that front end around it. So that's really how this application came together. And again, that's pretty standard across any number of innovative ideas you have. Is presentation is very key, right? If I can't present this to a business user or a non-technical user, I'm probably not demonstrating the full value of the solution. So that's very critical. So what did we learn? Well, standardize and simplify is what I spoke about before. So using standards, not reinventing the wheel, and understanding that this environment is changing rapidly. So having a framework that can swap out components, whether that's a foundational model or that's a data source or an external data source via API, that's critical. You don't want to rebuild the entire application to just be able to augment that. If a new large language model comes out, either through AWS or from another source, we want to be able to quickly do that. And that's what the team did. When we started with this Bedrock was in preview and had a lot of limited functionality, a more limited set of large language models initially. And as those came online and as Bedrock became generally available, we were able to augment the framework really quickly. So having that component architecture, again, more of a cloud native view of the architecture is very important. There is trial and error. You're not going to just connect these things, ask a question, and necessarily get a good answer. Trial and error and understanding which models are working best is part of this, and that's just a natural portion of understanding how these models work. You start seeing patterns in terms of where you're getting better results, how you can possibly fine-tune those results, etc. Don't underestimate your data pipelines. Again, the key capability here is that you're bringing your data to the table. So to get full value of your data set and source code, you need to connect that into the Amazon Bedrock environment, and that's a little bit of what I showed earlier. And as I've repeated several times, the standardized frameworks and tools simplify the process. So this is why we love Amazon Bedrock, and this is why we leveraged our landing zone accelerator to be the foundation of it. We also used Helm for benchmarking and accuracy. This is critical in optimizing both from a performance and cost perspective, as well as understanding which type of compute best suits this and being able to play with SageMaker and other tools. We haven't avoided security. Security's baked into Bedrock, so focus on that. Security will be one of the things that ruins your day. Okay, so a little summary here. What do we like about Bedrock? It's tightly integrated into the AWS technology stack. So it's a familiar tool. If I've used other AWS services, I can get a quick understanding of how to configure Amazon Bedrock because it is consistent with the overall AWS technology stack. It's secure by design. And again, having a trusted framework where we can say to the CEO or to the end customer, your data is not at risk, but we can provide additional value on your data is very important. It is integrating with multiple leading foundation models, and that number of models is expanding rapidly. And I think a differentiator for AWS here is you've probably heard about this week, is it does leverage purpose-built underlying silicon chips for scale and efficiency, and also cost. So we really feel that this is one of the quickest paths to innovation and business value. So what's next for us with our contracts insights? We went through kind of feasibility, then went into really a minimal viable product, and are now in really the production phase of that. So we're taking feedback. This is both manual feedback and automated feedback, and improving our prompts, evaluating and re-ranking the results that we see. A little bit of this could get into training, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And one of the things here, and again, assuming that you're in an enterprise IT environment, understanding your costs before you incur the cost. And this is great about AWS, the transparency of cost is great, but building that into the application so we understand, hey, I've just input a very massive data set, and I want to run several queries against that. I need to understand what that's going to cost. AI agents. So we're investigating the usage patterns for AI agents, mapping those to our existing flows, evaluating things like LangChain and Llama Index, and implementing chat-like functionality, which is very common, and tailoring to our enterprise business processes, attaining more documents, and customizing our RAG app. So thank you all for attending today. I hope you learned a few things. This is definitely a deep and complex topic. We're over at booth 120, that we can provide a demo of the application in an interactive manner. You can meet some of the developers who are in here, and I'd like to thank them. And if you're interested in our landing zone, we can talk to you about that too. Thank you.